Kia ora, bula, kia rana, talofa, maloelele, and welcome to Palagi and Pisanisi Pod. My name's Glenn Murphy. I'm here on Waiheke Island, Aotearoa today. And Dave, great to be with you for another week.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Ali, hello, geta, kia rana, koutou katoa toa. This is David Dewar dialing in from Rarotonga, Cook Islands. And previously based in Suva, and Glenn and I, of course, have been working across the Pacific and Australia for the last, 5 or 6 years now, working with New Zealand, Australian and Pacific businesses to help them understand the intricacies of this region and how they can be their best selves in this phenomenal part of the world. It's fantastic to be doing so again with Glenn through this weekly podcast.
And the main feature of this episode is a Talanoa coming up with Paul Clark from the Distilling Company in Fiji, which, of course, is something we're very fascinated in, and learning how he's developed his business and what he's seeing across the region in terms of trends for a business like the Distilling Company.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. And I should, for those watching online, I've got my prop here. It is, of course, 10 to 11 in the morning. I'm on a Friday morning right now, so I haven't opened the bottle just yet. But of course, the other thing that people might notice if they're watching online is that I'm wearing the colours of Team Australia today. So I've got my good Aussie bowler shirt on with my cricket playing kangaroo and barbecuing prawn. And that's because as we record right now, the Australian football team is right in the midst of its game against the United States. So backing in Team Australia today. Unfortunately, they're about 2-0 down. So few Aussie fans, let's see how they go. Might be needing the gin a bit later on.
Well, it is a very distinctive shirt, Dave, shall we say. How's this week been? I've seen lots of posts on LinkedIn from the New Zealand Fiji Business Council trip to Fiji, so it looks like that's been going really well.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. It's sounding like that's been another, really, really great set of engagements. And I've been getting various media articles, but also WhatsApp and Viber messages from people, which, looking at the timestamp has probably been taken in the early hours of the morning. So it's good to see that people are certainly enjoying themselves and keeping those, no doubt, business-related discussions and connections going on late into the evening. One of the key, priorities of the council, on paper at least, is to help grow the trade between New Zealand and Fiji to over 2 billion New Zealand dollars by 2030. And one of the pieces of news I saw in the Fiji Times this morning was reporting on the remarks of Fiji's Reserve Bank Governor, Arif Ali, who is a real authority on, the Fijian macroeconomy. But he spoke yesterday at the council meeting and made the point that actually, if you take into account transfers, investment, and some of the other capital flows that come into Fiji from New Zealand, then in fact the bilateral economic relationship between New Zealand and Fiji is already over $2 billion. So it was great to see that kind of the richness of that economic picture being talked about, because often people they focus on stuff like basic level, like goods trade, and they say, oh, well, Fiji exports only, less than $100 million of predominantly agricultural produce to New Zealand. And then, New Zealand, by contrast, exports over $1 billion of goods into Fiji. So there's this huge mismatch. And then you go, well, hang on, actually, if you work in the services trade and the tourism spend into that picture, it becomes a lot more balanced. And what we were seeing from the Reserve Bank Governor was actually to take that to another level of sophistication and talk about the, things like remittance inflows and foreign investment, which, of course, from a Reserve Bank Governor's point of view and from a macroeconomic point of view, that's just as, if not more important, than what goods you're sending in and out of the country. So, really, really cool to see that strength of that relationship continuing.
And the other big global news this week, of course, Dave, has been the on-again, off-again kind of deal between the US and Iran, and hopefully the Hormuz Strait has been opening up. But it sounds like it'll be a little while perhaps before the region really feels the relaxation of those constraints.
Let's wait and see. Certainly for the Pacific, as you say, just as we were talking about, when this all first kicked off, there will be a lag effect, and that's a consequence of how the region regulates fuel. As you'll recall, the way that it happens is you get the fuel companies coming to the regulators, whether it's the Commerce and Competition Authority in places like Fiji or the Price Board here in Cook Islands. They present their receipts for the last month, and then that then flows through into what they're allowed to charge at the pump. And so it's by definition a month delayed because they're bringing in last month's costs in order to recoup. So even if prices were to drop off as of tomorrow, and in fact oil has gone down. I think the price of oil is down back below 100 now, or floating around 80 to 90. Even still, we're still really dealing with what was happening last month at the pump today in the Pacific, and so there will be that lag. But certainly people are very, very focused on it at the moment.
Yeah, and you were saying before there was some other very good news in the Cook Islands this week in terms of a fisherman who was lost and now found.
Yeah, absolutely. No, really, really awesome news. And I think, this is something that is sort of the nightmare, I guess, of the Pacific. Some guy goes out fishing, or multiple people go out fishing. Weather kicks up or the engine breaks down or whatever, and then they go off the radar and no one sort of hears from them. And so it's sort of everyone's worst nightmare. And sure enough, this happened to this poor fellow from Puka Puka, which is probably one of, if not the most remote part of the northern Cook Islands. It's about halfway to, Samoa. And sure enough, this fisherman who headed out about a week ago, hadn't been seen. There were various air sorties flown by Air Rarotonga, which had a plane up in the area. But people were, certainly praying and hoping that for some good news. And sure enough, yesterday, the brilliant news came through that a Royal New Zealand Air Force P8 Orion had P8 Poseidon, I should say, had found him. And had located him. He was about 180 nautical miles out of Samoa, but still alive, waving his paddle, and no doubt very, very happy to be picked up. And so they were rediverting some fishing vessels to go and get him. But just awesome news, and everyone in Cook Islands has been really celebrating that. And I think what that says just about the connectivity, the investment, and the support that happens across the region, and how quickly those assets can be mobilised, and just the awesome work that they do. So huge kudos to the New Zealand Air Force, and everyone sort of involved in that search and rescue operation, for what is a really, really great outcome.
Well, to me, Dave, that sounds like a terrific reason to celebrate. And what better thing to celebrate with than a bit of Blue Turtle gin?
Than a Blue Turtle, exactly.
Company.
Yeah.
And so that's a great way to lead us into the Talanoa with Paul.
We're very, very privileged today to be joined by Paul Clark, who should be known to, or at least his product should be known to, anyone who's travelled to Fiji in the last couple of years. And that is because one of the products is the Blue Turtle gin. And of course, I have an old bottle here. Paul's just reminded me that they've recently changed the bottle shape. So I'm sure the label, however, will be familiar to anyone who's visited Fiji in the last couple of years. And certainly, if it's not already, it will be on your next trip. It's been awesome for me as both a person involved in business in the Pacific, but also as an avid consumer of the product, to see some of the strength that the business has shown over the last couple of years, and most recently winning some very prestigious global awards. So it's awesome to be joined by Paul today. He's dialing in from the distillery itself, which is very on brand. And Paul, Yandra Vinaka, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, Yandra, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on, Paul, and lovely to meet you today.
And you, Glenn.
Paul, we usually like starting these episodes by asking our guests really to tell their own story and to tell us a bit about what's brought you either to Fiji, but also the origins of the business.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very long story, really. But so my mum was born in Fiji, and both my great-grandfathers came here in the mid-19th century. And my great uncle was a guy called Sir Hugh Ragg, who was credited with starting tourism here. And my other uncle was a guy called Hugh Ragg, who ran Carlton United Breweries here for many years. So as a young child, I was in and out of Fiji all my life. So it always felt like it actually felt like home more than Australia, to be honest. When I was a kid, I started, like most kids did, left school, went to uni, hated it, lasted 7 weeks at uni, and went and got a job, and fell into auctioneering, funnily enough, which is I'd done some work experience in, and that kind of took me around the world. For some odd reason, my expertise became old cars, but quite expensive ones. So I broke the Australian auction record when I was 21 for a car, and then I left that job, went to London, rolled up at Sotheby's and Christie's and kind of knocked on the door and said, give me a job. And one of them did, much to my surprise. And I got sick of that, and I ran away to France and I taught sailing for 6 months, which is one of my great loves. And then I decided I better get home. So I went back home again, started my first business at the tender age of 20, 22, I think, or 23. That was a big learning curve. Didn't go so well, admittedly, but I learned an awful lot about business. We didn't go bankrupt, put it that way. Didn't lose any money, but it wasn't perhaps my most fabulous 3 or 4 years. And I got over that and sort of moved on and went travelling again. Came back to Sydney, but then my old boss actually from Christie's, Robert Brooks, who was a very, very famous guy. His father ran Christie's for many years. He'd started his own company, which was called Brooks, obviously, and was particularly focused on cars. And they kind of contacted me and said, look, will you help us start it in Australia? So I helped them launch Brooks in Australia, which became Bottoms, which is now the 3rd largest auction house in the world. And we launched in Australia, and they said, having problems getting into the States, will you go and look at it? So I said, sure. So I hopped on a plane, went to San Francisco, had no idea what I was doing. And I thought, well, who do I call? Who has cars in America? And I thought, well, Jay Leno, he's got cars. So being the brash young Australian I was, I ring up the studio and I say, can I talk to Jay Leno? And they said, no. I said, well, no, it's about cars, And so I got through 50 people. I finally got to his PA and she said, yes. I said, oh, look, it's Paul Clark calling from at that stage Brooks. And I'd love to talk to Jay about cars. And she went, cars? And I could hear him in the background. He went, cars? So he hops on the phone and he goes, hey. I go, hi, Jay. You don't know me, but I'm Paul Clark. He says, oh, no, I know you guys. He said, come down to the show tomorrow. So I hop on a plane in San Francisco, fly down to LA. I'm sitting in the front row of the studio and he's going, where's Paul Clark? And all these people are looking at me. It was quite surreal, actually. And honestly, all the time I spent in the States doing what I was doing was kind of surreal. My job description was international playboy, I mean, that's what I used to do. Fly around the world, have lunch with people, sell outrageously expensive cars to, incredibly well-known people and having a ball. So that was a really interesting time in my life. But I got to the stage after about 4 years in the US that I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
So I rang him up, said, like, I'm done. It was a bit odd. I was just changing ownership of expensive items and not really, building anything or doing anything.
You can only be an international playboy for so long, is what I've found in my life, anyway.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Glenn. But it was surreal, like Nick Cage. I sold him his first Bugatti.
Wow.
Yeah, like all these people, Ralph Lauren, all these guys.
Yeah.
But as I said, once I lose passion for something, I move on. And then it even got a bit odder after that. I love sailing, and I used to race a bit out of the San Francisco Yacht Club. And one of the guys there was invested in a company, and they weren't very happy with it, and he asked me to go and look at it. And I said, well, look, it's not really my thing. So I went down to San Jose, and I spent 18 months there dismantling this company that they'd done their money on, and didn't enjoy the business at all that type of world, to be completely honest. And Mum and Dad were getting older, so I thought time to up stakes. So I headed back to Australia, it was good getting back. But then I didn't know what to do. I have all these useless skills. So I just bought and sold a bit of property for a while. I had a little office in Surrey Hills. And a friend of mine, good mate of mine, because he was down in sorts, said, just come and work in my office for a while. And he had a pitch one day for a fairly large account. And he was a one-man band. Very talented designer, very good on brands and stuff, but not so much a public speaker, a raconteur, and he said, what do I do? He was panicking. I said, well, I'll do it for you. So he got up and did this pitch and he won it. And he thought, well, geez, what do I do now? And I said, well, I don't know. Well, let's start a company. So we went into, the creative side of things. We ran that agency for, wow, it must have been 12 years I was there. And it was good for me because it kept me in Sydney as my parents were getting older, and my grandmother as well. After my mum passed away, I said, I'm done now. And I'd been sniffing around Fiji for a while, trying to find a business that added up. And at my heart, everything I've learned and all the people that have taught me over the years, I'm a businessman at heart. If the numbers don't stack up, the numbers don't stack up. Right. And I looked at the numbers on a lot of stuff in Fiji, and a lot of numbers don't stack up here. but liquor did. And also, I find it unusual that, Fiji is such a sugarcane-rich country and molasses-rich country. We have this minuscule liquor industry. I mean, tiny. Barbados, which is half the size of Fiji, has an industry that's probably 50 times ours, and that's where we should be. Honestly, I had zero experience in distilling, like zero. So I started going out and visiting distilleries, talking to distillers, and then I bought a little 20-litre still and was cooking up hooch in my kitchen in Surrey Hills. But then, after talking to all these guys and reading everything, I thought, well, look, we can do this. It can't be that bloody hard. So we thought, right, let's hit the button. And so my brother was here putting all of the difficult stuff, the stills and all this, the water, the electricity, the boilers together while I was back and forth, but more in Sydney. And then eventually left the place in Sydney and moved full-time to Fiji. Well, it'll be 7 years ago now. And our timing was impeccable. This all happened about 6 months before COVID. So our first vodka came out, I think the gin came out just before COVID hit. And so we didn't shut up shop. It was actually, to be completely honest, I think it was probably the best thing that ever happened to us. Because as I said, we didn't know what we were doing, but that gave me the opportunity to pull the whole process apart from the beginning of the fermentation to the distillation to the resting to the sparging to everything, and get the process right. I mean, our first vodka, to be honest, wasn't that good. It'd do the job, but I wouldn't call it a great vodka by any means.
You wouldn't enter it in the London competition.
No, mate. No, I wasn't that silly. And so for those 2 years, we kept all the staff on. We only closed, I think, for 2 weeks because of a cyclone. And over that 2-year period, I was learning, reading, testing, distilling, fermenting. And when the 2 years was up, our products were, 100% better than they were when we started. And,
Right.
On that ensuing period, we never stopped. I'm never 100% happy with a product. If I can make it better, I do. As part of just making a good product, it has to be Fijian. So we don't import. One of the biggest problems we have actually is a lot of people don't think it's made in Fiji because it's too good.
Really?
And yeah, we get it quite often. And it's getting past that, a Fiji, we don't produce great products here. I mean, we do. The only thing we import are the juniper berries. Everything else here is Fijian. For many years, people have seen products that are imported as more sophisticated, but it's actually not true. We do have some really world-class products here, and we should be constantly promoting them, moving to the next step.
That's a really interesting point, actually, Paul. Mentioned earlier that one of my old colleagues and a friend of yours was the first guy who handed me a bottle of Blue Turtle gin. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, this will be interesting, Fijian gin. I've never heard of that. And then, of course, I tried the product and I was just stunned at how good it was.
Thank you, Glenn,
yeah, just sort of living proof of the story you're telling about the quality, and sort of being a little bit skeptical about it for a start, but then being like, oh gosh, this actually is fantastic gin and world class.
It is. And, we want to change the story. So, like most distilleries, you start off with white liquor because I can make white liquor relatively quickly. But the dark stuff is where we all want to be. I love Blue Turtle. It's always been my baby. But the rum that we are producing is going to change the conversation about Fijian rum forever. No, but this is a long process. It's an enormous investment. But I'm putting down barrels now that I'll be lucky to be alive when they're open. This year we will have put down another 200 barrels of high proof rum. So that's another 200 barrels is 40,000 litres of high proof, another 60,000 bottles. So we're putting that down every year plus, and we're going to hit, 80 to 100,000 bottles a year soon. So, but to do that, you've got to firstly go and find barrels. We've got a really good supply. One good side of what's been happening in America with all the tariffs for us is barrels have become a lot cheaper. And people always ask me, why do you put them in ex-bourbon barrels? And the simple answer is, well, there's two answers. One, because they're consistent, and two, because there's a lot of them. A lot of people don't realize that the rule and law with bourbon is that it must go into a new American oak cask and only be used once. After that, the barrels go.
Yeah.
So 90% of the whiskey in Scotland is ex-bourbon barrels, and a huge amount of the rum in the world is ex-bourbon as well.
Hey, and you talked earlier about the numbers and how the numbers stack up, and I always wonder about how the economics of that stacks up when you've got to put so much cash into production that you then have to put aside and you won't actually get a return on for another 10, 15 years.
Yeah, well, this has been always the problem with dark liquor. It doesn't matter whether it's rum, whiskey, rye, whatever it is, or bourbon. But the return on it is relatively high. And rum is now having its time in the sun, and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Now I'm talking about stuff like Foursquare out of Barbados. We work with the same ethos. We do not dose our rum. There's no sugar in it. There's nothing in it. It's just liquor and wood.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the other really important thing for us here, and thing I've been pushing for, is geographical denomination. You know, that if it's a Fijian rum, it needs to be made here, matured here, and bottled here. One of the problems we have here is that there's a lot of raw rum that's sold out of the country to one of the big bottlers, and that's marketed as Fijian, and it's not.
What does the process involve? And sort of as part of that, how do you go about making a genuinely Pacific spirit?
This is a question I ask a lot of distillers when I walk into the distillery. And they say, I'm a distiller. And I'm like, well, where are your ferments? Because unless you are fermenting your base product and stripping that and making ethanol or rum out of it, you're not a distiller as far as I'm concerned. What we do, you know, because we want to produce liquor that is of a place. So we take molasses from FSC. We bring it here. We put it in one of these things behind me, which is a fermenter. And, you know, ethanol and yeast are really extraordinary products. There must be some magic in the method, because without yeast, you couldn't make alcohol, and without ethanol, you couldn't make gin. So when yeast loves sugar or carbohydrates, and what we do is we pop it in the fermenter with a few other bits and bobs, and then pop the yeast in. But the thing about this is that people forget is that they're living organisms. So the yeast, this is the single most important thing in this distillery. If they go wrong, nothing else works. If you've got a bad fermentation, doesn't matter how well you distill it, how long you leave it in a barrel, whatever else you do, it's never going to be good. So this is the most important thing. And look, for rum, the actual distillation of rum, and there are a million ways to skin a cat. So we go to the ferment first, made from molasses. Can't get much more Fijian than that, really. And we're also testing ferments with cane juice. So direct from cane juice to ethanol, or cane juice to agricole, or cane juice to rum. We're running the whole system now to see if it works. So, you know, and the other thing here is that you must distill your base product, your ethanol, above a certain percentage, so certainly above 95%, in order to have enough neutral spirit to create a gin.
Is there an opportunity, and I know nothing about juniper, but is there an opportunity to grow that locally over time as well? Is that anything that's on the agenda?
Look, I've tried. I've struck it a few times, but it's just not cold enough in Fiji. Juniper needs a really big cold snap to go dormant, and then the spring to wake it up.
Okay.
Mate, I've had juniper in and out of the freezer and out of the fridge and into the dirt and up in Nandonivatu. I've tried everything. But I think I've reached the conclusion now that juniper is not a plant that will grow effectively in Fiji. So I would love to do that, don't get me wrong, but we just don't have the climate here for it.
Right. Yeah. You've won some international awards recently, and so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so we've won quite a few awards over the years. Look, honestly, we don't chase them. The only reason I put our spirits into competitions is to get feedback.
Right. Okay.
Because getting genuine feedback is sometimes quite difficult. I mean, I know when a liquor's good, you know, but I want someone else to say, yes, Paul, you're right. So feedback, and also, I guess, a bit of visibility. So we've been, you know, scaling this business to the stage where we are ready to start exporting. Because people say, oh, export, but they don't understand the complexity of doing that, and also the volumes you need to produce. So part of the competition, the reason I did it was the vodka. You know, the vodka I've been working on. And I finally got it to the stage where, you know, where it's absolutely world class. I want them to be able to take this and say, it's Fijian, it's made from sugarcane, and they're going to take it on board. The liquor world, as you know, is a very complex beast.
Yeah.
And our markets, we probably get, I don't know, 5, 10 emails or 20 emails a month out of Australia saying, where can we buy the gin? And I write back and say, you can't. You've got to come back to Fiji.
You got to come to Fiji, yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your point, I haven't exported because I wanted to get everything right before we did it, because once we start, we can't stop.
Yeah. How do you judge what a good gin is?
People always have their own preferences. You know, we're very lucky that a lot of people like our palate as well. But one thing we try and do with our liquors, in particular the gin, the rum, obviously not vodka, but we don't make them a one note. You don't put the gin in your mouth and it tastes the same from the front to the back. The drinking experience is different all the way through your palate, and that's what we try and do. We're a one-shot distillation, and all the botanicals that go into our gin marry in such a way as they don't become a cake, but they become a flavour profile that gives you probably 3 or 4 experiences through the drink. So back to the point, what makes a great gin? Look, that depends on who's drinking it at the time, and some of it's situational. You know, you could be sitting on a beach in Fiji going, my God, this gin's amazing. But you get home to Melbourne and it's snowing and cold, and you go, oh, this is not very good. For us, I just judge it that we sell a lot of it, so we're doing something right.
Yeah.
You mentioned that kind of need for careful scaling. What does that look like for you? How easy is that in Fiji? What sort of stuff do you have to think about that?
Scale for us here means more equipment, more fermenters, bigger stills. So I've got another 2,000 litre pot arriving in 3 weeks, and that will just become the dedicated rum still now. So we're building a new distillery in Nandi. We're building that facility to do 500 to 1 million litres a year. And that's the scale we want to get to. But to get to that scale, this is, out of all the businesses I've run, this is by far the most complex. There are so many inputs, so many outputs, so many moving parts. What's incredibly important in Fiji is getting good people to work with and paying them well. We pay them well, we train them well, we upskill them. You know, my assistant distiller isn't even 21. I go to the local headmistress and I say, who was really smart, can't go to uni, and the family, you know, can't support them or whatever. And she gives me a few names and I interview them, and that's how we get our hires. And that's how I got this kid. And he can run the stills without me now. So, you know, for me, it's also, when we talk about scale, we all know that staff can be problematic in Fiji, but that's only problematic if you don't take care of them, you know, because everyone here becomes part of our family. And if someone's sick or tired or the house blows down, we go and fix it and put it back up again. So regardless of all the SOPs, I mean, SOPs, the HACCP, everything else you've got in place to make sure that it runs, the staff is the single most important thing. Could my brother and I run this by ourselves? Probably, but I think we'd be dead in a few years. You know, so part of that scale question, one is staff, key, because I can now leave the distillery and I know it works because everything's in place. 2 is obviously equipment, and we've invested, you know, millions of dollars in equipment, and we're still investing. We'll hit our stride really well in the next 2 years. So the other issue we obviously have here when it comes to scale is electricity.
Right.
Which is a real problem. I mean, this year alone, we've probably lost 6 days. So a big part of what we're doing in Nandi is solar. We're actually probably even going to go to a solar powered boiler. It's an electric boiler powered by the sun. And the other part of scale is we have the tyranny of distance here. So, you know, a 40-foot container of bottles to get from my supplier to me, by the time I order it to here, is probably 9 weeks. So you think about when you're starting to produce 500,000 bottles a year, what that looks like, how many containers you've got and the movement of them and how you manage that is really difficult and complex. So we're at the stage now where I feel comfortable that we can now start exporting, probably to Australia and New Zealand in the next 4 to 5 months, and then bigger markets the year after that.
We are talking to Paul Clark, the managing director of the distillery company in Fiji, and we're coming towards the end, I think, of the Talanoa, which has been incredibly insightful. So, you know, Vinaka Paul, one of the sort of final questions we often like to ask our guests, you know, is really, you know, what advice would you give, you know, if you were maybe to yourself starting back over?
If you're going to start a business, you have to be passionate about it, because you're going to work long hours, you're going to work weekends, you're going to be paid less than your staff for a while. So don't go into a business thinking that you're going to make millions of dollars in the next year, and don't go into a business without a really solid support network of staff. If you're doing business in the Pacific, particularly Fiji, the framework has become a lot harder. So we're trying to put first world checklists against a country that is still struggling in the public service. So make sure that you understand everything that you need to be across for government, and that you're incredibly passionate about the business. And the other thing, obviously, in Fiji in particular, no doubt throughout the Pacific, is you must be persistent. You cannot give up. Things always come good, but you got to love it, and you can never give up.
And I suppose if you're having a particularly tough day, there's always a bottle of Blue Turtle gin to make you feel a little bit better about yourself at the end of it, right,
There
Paul?
is, mate. I've got to say I've been drinking a bit more of the dark rum lately now that it's got it where I wanted it. Yeah, I mean, as I said, the gin was always my first love, but the rum is such an exciting product, and I think it'll really change the conversation around Fijian spirits.
Is the rum on the market, Paul, or is it
No,
still to
Glenn,
come?
look, I'm saying November, so I'm very excited about it, to bring Fiji a rum that I think will shatter what people's current conceptions of Fijian rum is.
Fantastic. Can I ask, will it be its own brand, or
Oh, yeah.
is that...
So it's actually, no, you're the first guys to hear it, but the name of the brand is VulaViti, which is, as you know, in the Fijian way. So, and I'm going to rebrand all the rums. So the dark rums, the white rums, they'll all come under the same brand.
Awesome. Oh, there we go. We heard it here first.
You did.
There we go. We love breaking
I'm sure.
business stories
I'm
on the pod, Paul. Hey, we've been talking to Paul Clark, Managing Director of the Distillery Company Fiji. Paul, thank you so much. This has been just a fantastic conversation. You and I have known one another for a while now. I've known your product for, well, as long as I think it's been on the market, and it's so cool, I think, to hear a bit more about the journey that's brought you to this point, that's brought the business to this point, and also I think, some of those opportunities. Huge Vinaka Vakalevu to you and to your team, and thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Man, that was cool, wasn't it, Dave? And I am so looking forward to that rum when it's ready. That's going to be amazing. But didn't the passion just come through from him?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've known Paul a while, and he's always been like that. He's always been incredibly passionate about his product, and I think, as someone who's kind of seen that business evolve in Fiji and the passion that goes into every part of it, not the product certainly, but also the marketing, the detailing on the bottles, the curation of the entire sort of experience around it. And I didn't actually know that story about his previous life in auctioneering in classic cars and highly expensive cars, but you can see that's a man who knows a luxury product when he sees one.
Yeah, fascinating background. I mean, he is that kind of guy who you just think, gee, wouldn't it be cool to sit down for an evening and have a few rums and just hear some of the more detailed stories about his past. Impressive in terms of his desire to just really prove that you can create a world-class product and a world-class brand out of Fiji. He talks about still not hitting their stride yet for a couple of years, really. Investments in new facilities in Nandi. I love the way he talked about having a love for your business that's going to help you be persistent and keep going through the hard times. I think there's a lot of lessons there in terms of the way he talked about his staff, how he finds good people, how he treats them, how he develops them, how he thinks of them as family and works with them.
Yeah, I love that story about the feeder out of the local high school. He made some points that, yes, there are some structural challenges to doing business in a place like Fiji and across the Pacific. Starting a business and growing a business anywhere is particularly challenging, but equally there's a huge amount of talent, there's a huge amount of passion from the human input all the way through to the ingredients, and I think it's just awesome to see someone with the passion, the know-how and the commitment to making that happen, and the proof that that's showing that such things are possible in the Pacific that aren't just good but are globally top-notch. I think hopefully anyone else listening in, not just from Fiji, but across the Pacific, should think, well, hey, there's no reason why I can't be also as committed to delivering something just as impressive, just as world-leading. Shout out to some of the other, really cool distillery businesses that I do know are around the region. And, my own neighbours here in Rarotonga, Mike and Ash and Sean and Miranda, who have started the Cook Islands Distillery Company.
So fantastic, Talanoa. And Dave, in my week ahead this week, big week coming up, because we are working with 30 different Pacifica creative enterprises in Auckland this week to help them think about how they internationalise their businesses and earn money internationally.
Super interested to hear how that goes, Glenn. I think recalling that conversation that you had with Sarah Leo a few weeks ago and just talking about the business of creativity. And, there's certainly a lot of potential there for people that, have this incredible creative skill to be able to turn that into a business and into commercial opportunity. So it's really cool, I think, that you're doing this, and that there's obviously been some real interest out of the community there.
I'm hoping to pin down Makareta Rurali from Creative New Zealand's Pacifica division to get her on the show and talk to us a little bit about the creative world. But Dave, what's coming up in your week?
This isn't a show about politics, as we often remind ourselves and our viewers, but of course it's politics is never far away, and I think some of the big news really doing the rounds in the region at the moment is looking ahead to, I guess, election season. And sort of a few weeks ago we did talk about some of the elections that are scheduled for later this year, and of course there's the New Zealand election, which I won't forget this time, coming up in November, but also expectations that Fiji will go to the polls, or needs to go to the polls, by the end of the year. And so I think there's a lot of commentary now and positioning and conversations happening about the political situation over there. And then just this morning we learned that here in Rarotonga that Parliament had been pushed forward a little early today, so there's been a few people speculating that might be a suggestion of an election being called at some point soon, because PM Brown, of course, also needs to hold an election, I think by October or November, sometime later this year anyway. So that could be relatively imminent. And all of these things have a deep influence, of course, on doing business out here in the regions. But my main priority for this week ahead is my son is turning 9 years old. And I think we'll be having he's requested a pizza sleepover party. So this time next week we'll see how I'm feeling, as I've been hosting 9 or 10 or however many of his best friends over for an extended party overnight.
Oh, very good. Well, I was going to suggest that maybe we do a later recording, but actually you're probably going to get woken up early anyway, so we'll stick to our normal time.
I might not have gone to sleep, and I might be needing that bottle of Blue Turtle.
Yeah. Well, the other area where we do expect a result, of course, is the Super Rugby final tonight. And Dave, we find ourselves for once on very opposite sides. Yourself being on the side of the Hurricanes, and of course me being on the side of the Chiefs.
May the best team win. May the Hurricanes' home advantage work to their advantage. So come on, the Canes.
Yeah, unlikely. I think the Chiefs are going to take it by 10. But anyway, we'll see what happens. So that's been Two Palagi and a Peace and Easy Pod for another week. And Dave, would you like to read us out?
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, another wonderful week out in the Pacific, and as ever, it's been a wonderful week as ever to be interviewing some of the most fascinating, insightful, and interesting people across the region, and we're really, really looking forward to the pipeline of guests that we have lined up for the next few weeks as well. It's the best part, of course, is engaging with our audience, and we're really, really enjoying the feedback that we're getting, whether it's through the social media channels. Facebook, Viber, LinkedIn is our main area of engagement, but it seems many of you know how to find us on many different channels. And of course, there is always our dedicated Gmail address, two.palagi, Palagi, @gmail.com. Really love hearing from you, how you're finding the show, how you're finding the topics and people that we're talking to, and any other ideas of topics or individuals or businesses that we could profile on the show. As ever, the Talanoa and the conversation continues. But this has been Two Palagi and a Peace and Easy Pod for the week ending 20 June.